FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
The show's brought to you by Audible. Audible's back as a sponsor. Just go to audiblepodcast.com/FSN and you'll see they've got over 150,000 titles to choose from fiction, nonfiction, bestsellers, every category imaginable. They've got free apps. You can download and listen on your iPhone, iPad, Android, Windows Phone, every device imaginable. And unlike a streaming or rental service, with Audible, you own your book. So you know that I've been an Audible fan for years now. I've listened to over 310 books since I've had it. Last one that I listened to was called The Frackers, and I will give a hat tip to Jason Burak for that one. An incredible book about the history of fracking in America, in Texas, and how it developed in North Dakota. It's a book that you really got to check out. I'm reading one right now, or I should say listening to it, called The Sons of Wichita, about the Koch brothers and how that family developed an immense business worth God knows how much, hundreds of billions of dollars. Incredible book. There's so many great books. I love the Joseph Finder books, the Harry Bosch series by Michael Connolly, but you've got so many books to choose from that you'll have to find one. And Audible's got an incredible offer for you right now. Go to audiblepodcast.fsn to take advantage of it right now. Okay. The way it works is really simple. You get a free audiobook of your choice and a free 30-day trial membership. So check it out now. It's really great. It's easy to use. And look, if you're like me, you don't have the time to read as much as you used to. But if you're driving in the car or you're sitting out by the pool or the beach, you put on a book. It's an amazing service. I love it. You will too. Go to audiblepodcast.com/FSN. Take advantage of that free book and that free 1 month's membership now. You're going to love it. I promise you. And tell me some books that you like, that you've listened. I'll tell you some of mine. If you send me an email today to khl@kerrylutz.com, I will give you my top 10 Audible picks. And I guarantee you're going to love them. Check it out now. audiblepodcast.com/FSN.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and so much going on in the world, but we'd be remiss if we didn't discuss the situation in Iraq and the recent beheading of reporter James Foley. And we've got Ivan Eland, Senior Fellow and Director, Center on Peace and Liberty over at the Independent Institute. Ivan, welcome back.
Thanks for having me on, Kerry.
Right. So we spoke about a month ago about what the U.S. should be doing with ISIS, or IS as it's called now, or the Islamic State. I'm not sure what to call it. It's got so many names in the media, but man, if you had to tailor make an enemy with all the features of the perfect enemy and justification to go in and pursue them, you couldn't have picked a better enemy than ISIS, could you?
Right. I mean, they're brutal. And unquestionably, this is a brutal act, chopping somebody's head off. We have to note, however, that normally this group kidnaps people for money. So if you're killing somebody, you're killing a money stream. And the reason that they did it is because the U.S. is attacking them with jet fighters and from the air, that sort of thing. So they're taking part of that money stream that they would get for kidnap ransom, and they're making a political statement. And I think we need to ask ourselves what to do about this group. Certainly, we haven't been very successful in dampening Islamic radicalism. In fact, our interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan, in Libya, have blamed Islamic radicalism. And I would also say that our smaller interventions in Yemen and Somalia have also done that. And so I think, when George Bush invaded Iraq, we got al-Qaeda in Iraq. That group was radicalized in U.S. prisons. A lot of the leaders of this ISIS group were al-Qaeda and Iraq leaders that were thrown into U.S. detention. They became radicalized. They went to Syria. They came back as ISIS. And of course, now we're bombing again. So what group is going to come up that's even more brutal than ISIS? That's scary. So I think we really ought to. The problem with Americans is that they're in large part, they forget about history. I think other countries have a deeper appreciation for their history than we do. And therefore, we can't even remember back to 2003 when all this started. So I think we need to go back and look at this again and see if we're not, as Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld asked, and nobody ever answered him in a cogent or coherent way, was, are we creating more terrorists than we're killing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we, like you said, nobody answered it. And another interesting thing that's coming up here is that the countries in the Middle East seem to be coalescing together, and the Russians appear to be getting involved. Iran is bombing them. Syria is bombing them. Maybe it's time for us to kind of just have a supporting role here and let others take the lead. And because they seem to be making more enemies every time they do an operation, ISIS, then it's just to our advantage just to kind of sit back and provide intelligence and let others kind of take the lead on this one, you know?
I think that's absolutely right. And I think we can do that for several reasons. First of all, ISIS is no real direct threat to the U.S. The biggest threat from ISIS is that there's some Americans over there fighting for ISIS and they decide they want to come back and cause trouble here. But I think, we can work on that by the law enforcement authorities here watching for those people, et cetera. The problem that we always get into is we're going to drain the swamp of the alligators, but the alligators go around the other way and come in our homeland as they did on 9/11. So I think, a lot of times when we try to drain the swamp of alligators, we could make more alligators. But I think one of the things that we can count on is that this group is not really a direct threat to the U.S., but to prevent it from becoming one, we should let other people take the lead. They weren't lopping people's heads off of Americans before this. They were preoccupied by fighting Syrians or Iraqis. And if we remember what happened in al-Qaeda in Iraq, which was the precursor to this group, and which was very, very violent, but not even as violent as this new al-Qaeda on steroids, this derivative of al-Qaeda on steroids, is, I should say, is that in the al-Qaeda situation, the Sunni people rose up because the group just got so brutal. The same will probably happen here. The only reason that ISIS got back into Iraq was because the Sunnis were had less trepidation for this group than they did the Shiite government of Maliki, who we were supporting. He was very discriminatory against the Sunnis, and most of the security forces were Shiite. So Maliki was oppressing the Sunnis. So what do? They let these people back into Iraq. Well, they can kick them out again, just like they did. That's how they got to Syria in the first place when they were al-Qaeda in Iraq, because the Sunnis said, wow, this group is so brutal. We'd rather help the Americans. They're foreign occupiers, but they're not committing these atrocities that then al-Qaeda in Iraq was. So they kicked them out. They became ISIS in Syria, went back on steroids, and they're back in Iraq. And so I think natural processes happen when groups get too violent. And I think al-Qaeda Central has suffered the same fate. Muslims don't support them, and I don't think Muslims support ISIS either.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the same thing you saw in Egypt. The Muslim Brotherhood was great in theory. Then they get into power. Then people see, oh, they want to take us back to the Middle Ages. We really don't want to go there. And uprising. So maybe having the military run Egypt isn't the ideal situation, but it's certainly better than having the Muslim Brotherhood running things. And, now they're out, and probably a similar thing's going to happen. What do you think the replacement of Maliki, as prime minister, do you think that is going to be a positive, a net positive, or it doesn't matter at this point?
I don't think it really matters that much at this point. Iraq has always been an artificial state, and they should have realized that it was created after World War I to get the oil there, for the British and the French to get the oil. And it has three different major groups. There are other groups as well, and tribes as well, but there are three major groups: the Kurds, the Shiites, and the Sunnis. And I wrote a book in 2007 called Partitioning for Peace, an Exit Strategy for Iraq, where I said, I basically said that Iraq is going to be partitioned one way or the other, either by a soft partition by negotiation, which the U.S. could have mediated before it withdrew its troops, or a hard partition by warfare. Well, we're now at the second of those, unfortunately, and Iraq is already partitioned. You have the ISIS running the Sunni part of Iraq. You have the Shiite government running the southern part, and you have the Kurds up in the northeast trying to hang on to theirs from ISIS, their quadrant. But the problem is we need decentralized government. We don't have to get rid of Iraq altogether, but there could be like an economic union or whatever, and security and politics are provided autonomously. So I think it matters little in these countries. We have, we try to get a unity government, but of course the purpose of a democracy is for one side to win and one side to lose, right? Now you have to, key thing in any liberal democracy is rights for the minority, and you don't have that here because the strong central government gets captured by one group and uses the government to oppress the other groups, which happened under Saddam and all the Sunni rulers before him, and which has now also happened under the Shiites with Maliki. So I don't think it's going to change. Iraq has a take no prisoners political style. They don't have a culture of compromise. It's not to say they could never become a democracy, but they're just not ready to have it imposed on them from above, which was what the United States tried to do. And I think talking about a power sharing or a unity government or something else of this nature is folly in this type of political culture.
Yeah, I guess we go back, like we discussed the last time, the wisdom of Joe Biden, which is just partition it and call it a day. And, he was laughed at, but really he had the best solution of anybody, and nobody took him seriously, which was really, other than you and me, which was really unfortunate at the time.
Yeah, I think he was absolutely right. And I had advocated partition at the time. The problem is nation states don't like to advocate partition of other countries because there's a lot of states like Spain, Belgium, Canada that have their own separatist movements, which they would not like to have partitioned off. So you'll find a bias in the international community against partition.
Yeah. Anything. Well, all nations are pro-statist. All nations are pro-statist when you get down to it, and anything that threatens the sanctity of the state is to be avoided at all costs, even when it's the perhaps the best solution for all parties concerned. And what about the humanitarian crisis of the Yazidis and the response that's been put forth so far? Has that helped? The news coming out, the news coming out is really sketchy, and I'm just not sure what's been done for these people so far.
Well, I think this is sort of a pretext. We always have to have some sort of a hanger to hang our interventions on, and this was the Yazidis was the humanitarian angle. But if you noticed, two purposes of the bombing, U.S. bombing, was to help the Yazidis beat back ISIS and help Erbil beat back ISIS, which has a bunch of U.S. facilities. Both of those has been accomplished to one extent or another, but yet the bombing is going on. So, of course, that's not the real reason for the bombing. And we can tell that this was the same thing that happened in Libya and that the Russians were mad about was, U.S. got a resolution, UN resolution, saying, well, we're just going to help these, Gaddafi's made some threats against some opposition people in Libya, and we're going to, do the humanitarian thing and put up a no-fly zone, et cetera. Well, of course, they used that to take out Gaddafi. The same is being true here. We're going to help the Yazidis. We're going to protect our facilities. Well, okay, we've done that to some extent. Now the bombing continues, and so the real objective is to decimate ISIS, or at least inhibit it.
Yeah, and I just wonder, with the Kurds, they lost the cities and the dam. I wonder if that was just a strategic withdrawal and the purpose to justify the bombing and, just to set the stage for this whole thing. It just seemed too convenient to me.
Yeah, I think so. And often we find that in warfare, that things are not what they appear. So, it's a real possibility, I think. But, the main purpose is to grind ISIS down. I don't really think Obama wants to do this, because he's laid his claim to getting the U.S. out of wars, and this is going back in. But I think ISIS is so scary to people. But I think we need to go back and look at some of our own actions may have led to the groups rising in the first place.
Yeah, it certainly seems arming the rebels in Syria had something to do with it. And now they've captured all these American weapons that we're now in the process of destroying, that we provided to the Iraqi government. I mean, it just reminds me of something out of Mad Magazine from way back when, Spy versus Spy or something. There's a certain absurd flavor to the whole thing that just undermines the whole argument and legitimacy of all of the U.S.'s prior actions there.
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, the ISIS has a great deal of U.S. weapons that they captured from the Iraqi army, which fled when they initially came in there. So now they have even more heavy weapons. They're very good weapons too, because the U.S. Gave them to the Iraqi army. So,
yeah, they've got advanced weaponry, and purportedly better than what the Kurds have, although I tend to doubt that. They're kind of, the media has been portraying the Kurds as seriously outgunned and outmanned, and yet the Kurds, we've been supplying them now for close to 15 years. So I just find it hard to believe that the Kurds are that seriously outgunned here.
Right. I think there may be an excuse, because you're right. We've been supplying them for a long time. And also they have had cohesive training and that sort of thing, whereas ISIS has gotten some of its equipment from Syria, some of its equipment from the U.S., et cetera. It's got a jumble of different kinds of weapons, and they've just picked up the training as they went. They got the weapons and they had to figure out how to use them. So this idea that the Kurds are defenseless, I'm a bit suspicious of too, because the Peshmerga have a reputation of being fierce fighters.
Yeah, and do we have any idea who is actually behind ISIS? Is there a country behind them, or a government, or some group of people behind them?
Well, some of the Gulf states have been supplying them with weapons, I think, but most of their leadership was in U.S. detention camps in Iraq. Their financial base is in Iraq, and always has been. And they're very basically self-sustaining. They do kidnappings for ransom. They take over oil facilities. They were very clever in Syria. They let the other groups fight Assad government while they grabbed oil facilities, weapons, captured weapons, etc. So they're fairly astute. They made some very good decisions. I'm not sure attacking the Kurds was a good idea, because that, of course, brings in the U.S., or although perhaps maybe they wanted to bring in the U.S. to get more support worldwide for their cause or whatever. That could be a possibility. I still think that was probably a bad idea for them.
Yeah, and like I say, they're just so barbaric.
Yes, I think they'll fall of their own, cruelty and brutality.
Yeah, I mean, if you had to make a poster child for everything that we've been fighting, the war on terror against, it's these guys. I mean, they're worse than anything. Just their brutality, burying people alive, the mass burials, the beheadings. It just shocks your conscience in every level.
Yes, it does. But I think we also have to say, do we have to save the world all the time? There's lots of groups out there that aren't very nice. And the question that we have to ask ourselves is this a direct threat to U.S. security? And if it's not, are we making things worse? Are we making it into a direct threat to U.S. security by bombing them? I mean, I think you're right. We can work through indirect means to help get rid of this group.
Yeah. I mean, they're just, any civilized person in the world has to be totally put off by them and disgusted. I mean, it's a case where you don't even have to, the journalistic community doesn't even have to hype what they've done. They just have to report exactly what they've done. And, the right. Western sensibilities are totally offended, right?
Right. I mean,
we'll get all your coughs out. Don't worry. So we'll just give it another minute and we'll end it. So just kind of sum up. So
okay. Yeah, I think they are very brutal. There's no question about that. And I think this beheading is a way to shock people because they want to intimidate people as well. I just think that the U.S., we're the most powerful country in the world. We don't need to get into hysterics about this. They're a brutal group. We have to assess whether they're a direct threat to the U.S. I would say that they're not. And I think the intelligence community does too, because they just don't have the infrastructure to do anything over here. Now, there could be some returning people that are American citizens from Syria, the Syria-Iraq area, that we might have to look out for to apprehend. But I think bombing makes it worse. And I think we're just destabilizing more territory and making these groups even more amped up. And they just get worse all the time. Who thought we could have had a worse group than Al-Qaeda in Iraq? But now we do.
Yep, now we do. And one final thing, rumors that they're connecting with the drug cartels in Mexico. Do you put any credence in them?
Well, I don't know. I don't have any inside information, but it wouldn't surprise me. They're kidnapping people for ransom. They're getting money however they can. So drugs may be another way to do it. The Taliban does that in Afghanistan, curiously. So I wouldn't put it past ISIS to do so too.
So we'll just have to see how they evolve, if they evolve. But obviously, the way that they're working now and the tactics they're using, they're definitely making a lot more enemies than friends. And really, we've seen that, even heard reports that there's been Russian pilots in planes bombing them as well. So they're definitely not making any friends. Anyway, Ivan, just tell us where we find your writing, how we buy your books. www.independent.org. And of course, all my books are available on Amazon, including my book, Partitioning for Peace, U.S. Exit Strategy for Iraq. All right. Excellent. And just go over to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. You find the link to Ivan's work over there and sign up for our newsletter. Ivan, we'll talk to you again real soon.
Thank you, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.